So hello everybody and welcome to the webinar. My name is Viqui Dill and today I get to be the presenter. I'm presenting on the Power of Story, which is a program that we have here at my work. And it's a cultural program and it got me clicks. It helped me to get my company and the employees to actually implement Office 365. And I use the program to its advantage and I'll tell you all about it. But first we have an icebreaker. Oops. Yeah, there you go. Now you have to type in the chat window. Let me adjust the chat window so I can see it. And the icebreaker is, who is this guy? Does anybody know who this is? Yes, yes, Trisha, that's exactly right. And I think he probably looked nothing like that. Um, I think this is the picture of Jesus that I remember from Vacation Bible School, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus. And that's probably also not his birthday. But anyway, that's Jesus. Now I have another John Lennon. Who is this? Does anybody know who this woman is? This one's kind of hard. Susan B. Anthony is a very good guess. It's not Susan B. Anthony. It's earlier than Susan B. Anthony, like 1850s-ish. Dolly Madison. That's a good guess, too. So this is actually Harriet Beecher Stowe. And we know Harriet Beecher Stowe, she wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin. She told a lot of stories, and her stories were influential enough to change the way that America felt about the slavery issue. And she was instrumental in using this power of story to affect the politics of the area of the time. And how about this guy? Anybody know who he is? I bet most of you do know who he is. So this is Walt Disney. You may recognize him. This is Walter Elias Disney, and he is also a great storyteller, and he used stories to convey messages to entertain us. He developed a movie genre that didn't exist before, the full-length cartoon with the kids as the audience, and parents could enjoy them too. How about this guy? Anybody recognize that man? So I bet we all recognize this man. This is Mr. Rogers. This is Fred McFeely Rogers. He is also a great storyteller. He told stories to kids on his show, but he also told stories to the Senate hearing to try to get funding for PBS. And in 7 minutes, he was able to get the Senate to agree to give PBS $20 million, which was a lot of money back then. And he did it basically. You can watch his speech on YouTube, and it's just 7 minutes long. And what he did was tell stories about how kids didn't have anything of quality to watch after school, and that they really needed to support PBS because PBS was not offering Tom and Jerry where the characters hit each other, but they were offering educational and programs that taught good morals. So that's Fred Rogers. All right, whose butt is this? I think most of us of a certain age recognize this picture. I think this is the Born to Run album cover for Bruce Springsteen. And Bruce Springsteen was also, excuse me, a really great storyteller. He sang songs pretty much that told stories about the common man. He told a lot of sort of narratives about people in New Jersey. I was living in New Jersey at the time, so I was really taken with this and his music and his storytelling. And how about this woman? Does anybody recognize this woman? This is a woman who works for Facebook. So this is Sheryl Sandberg. And Sheryl Sandberg also is a good storyteller. She did write that book, Lean In. She told stories. She encouraged women to stand up, put their hand up, sit at the table, to really lean in to their careers and to their jobs. And then something terrible happened and her husband died very young. And she told more stories about that. She was able to share some of her personal story. And I think it helped a lot of women who were in the same situation. So she's a very good storyteller. And the last storyteller is this gal. This is, I think, when I first started using this icebreaker, it was about a year ago, before the election, and nobody knew who she was. I could stump everybody, and I think pretty much now everybody knows this is AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and she won her political campaign by basically going door to door and telling stories. She's a good storyteller, faced in a face-to-face environment. She's also a very good storyteller online, and she is showing Congress how to use things like Instagram to tell stories and get their messages across. So these are my storytellers. I guess I've given away the answer. What do they all have in common? They told stories that changed the world, and that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the power of telling stories. So about storytelling, we know that stories change hearts. Harriet Beecher Stowe is a good example. Stories will sell merchandise. We know that. Stories win political campaigns. We saw that with AOC. Stories make training sticky, right? We are encouraged to use personas and to tell stories when we're doing training. It makes it much stickier, and the learner will walk away remembering more of your training if you use story format. And stories can communicate the best practice in technical communication, and that's what I want to talk about today, storytelling. So let me talk a little bit about myself. My official title is Technical Communications Leader, which means I do internal communication, I do training, and I do a lot of software evangelism, just trying to help people make friends with the software. My client base includes 4,000 employees that have system access, so 4,000 of us are online, and there's about another 7,000 of us that don't have system access. There's mostly our workers on the factory floor. So if I want to communicate with those people that don't have system access, I'll use paper. Frequently, sometimes I make a poster. We have a company newspaper. Sometimes I'll use the newspaper to get the word out. Sometimes we'll use other kinds of hard copy because we want to communicate with them too. So the tools that we're going to talk about today, part of my job was to evangelize Office 365 and try to get a good implementation when we rolled it out. So Office 365 comes with Outlook, Excel, Word, PowerPoint, OneNote. Those are the tools that we were already familiar with and we loved them. But it also had a suite of newer, different, maybe scary tools. We had SharePoint Online, which a lot of people in my company were a little bit afraid of, and we have this Teams tool, we have groups, we have Yammer, we have Stream, video, a couple of video formats, and this thing called Delve, which is a search engine and collaboration tool. These were new and scary, and we were having trouble getting people to try new tools. You know, they just loved Excel or Word, and that was kind of their hammer, so every problem looked to them like a nail. And we wanted to show them other tools that they could use. On top of that, when we implemented Office 365, we went to two-factor authentication. We were a growing company at that time. We had just gone over $1 billion in revenue, and we were more of a target for hacking in and phishing and that kind of thing. So we went to two-factor authentication. You have to sign in on the screen with your password, and then you have to get a code from your phone. The system will send a code to your phone. And people didn't like that because it was a lot more trouble to log in. So we kind of had our work cut out for us, try to get people to make friends with the Office 365 tools. and they felt, a little bit like it was insult to injury. You're making me learn something new, and you're making me use my phone, and I have to log in so often. So that was kind of basically the problem. So now I'm talking about the Power of Story program. Power of Story at my company started off as a lunch and learn kind of a session. We would have key managers, and that's a capital K and a capital M. For us, the key managers are basically anybody director level or above. And they would talk for about an hour. They would tell the attendees that were giving lunch to about what they do, how they got there, what happens in their area. And it was considered to be an educational thing. Then it grew beyond just the key managers to pretty much all employees that were brave enough to tell their story for an hour. It was very honest. It was first person, so it was very engaging. It eventually got to be very transparent. We were really honest with one another, and we shared some really important things. And everyone got free food. And one of the places that we got food from was a place called the Firefly Cafe and Bakery, and they're a 501c3 in our area. Their mission is basically to hire and train for food service the handicapped people, especially, differently abled people, especially people on the autism spectrum. So we felt like this was a good opportunity for us to support them. And then if you weren't brave enough to tell your story out loud, you could make a scrapbook page. So we had this scrapbook page program. And then we began to tell stories. We have a wellness journal that comes out once a month, and they began to add first-person stories to that. So instead of just having an issue that's about nutrition, we would have an issue that's about nutrition, and someone would talk about when they started cooking and eating healthier and how it changed their life. That most recent one is really interesting. It was on staying physically safe, being physically safe. And so we talked about things like this one woman presented her story of when she was stalked. And that was so honest. But anyways, very engaging. All of these power stories are very engaging. We have a couple of different ways to do that. And this is a video that I took of a Power of Story session. The guy on the right here, that's our Chief Executive Officer. His name is Kerry Dunstan, and he is really, really a great leader. He's the one who came up with this idea of the Power of Story program, and he's really been evangelizing it. He's very much into emotional intelligence and leading us to be more emotionally intelligent. And this is part of why we have this program. It was his brainchild. And here he is telling his story. The people in the audience here are young professionals from our local Chamber of Commerce. So he is trying to explain to them they need to tell their stories, and they need to share their stories and listen to one another's stories. So that's Kerry Dunstan. Here is his scrapbook page. You can see there's a lot of messages here, but you can see it's got geography. He's got maps of where he's been. He's got nice pictures of the history of his family. Looks like pictures of his kids as a baby, and then little sayings, what's important to him, family, faith, just be you. And so we were able to use this scrapbook idea to make another way for people to tell their stories, and for us to see each other's stories and listen to each other's stories. And in the Power Story session, we had a woman who was brave enough to share her struggle with suicide. And it really kind of revolutionized our company. It changed things because all of a sudden we were talking about this subject that was so hard to talk about. And she was able to then energize employees for joining in this Out of the Darkness walk. It's a walk that we have every year to raise money and awareness for suicide prevention. And because this woman was brave enough to tell this part of her story, we were able to raise a couple $1,000s for this important cause. And here is her scrapbook page. You can see that Out of the Darkness is front and center here. You can see that's very important to her, and she's brave enough to share that. And when one person is brave enough to share something, then suddenly the rest of us start to feel more brave, and we share on a more deep level. But really builds trust. And then here's me and my son. We did a Power of Story. This one was focused on autism awareness. It was during April. And so we were talking about autism awareness and our journey, his journey as an adult that is on the spectrum, and my journey as a parent of someone on the spectrum. And of course, we had to do some music. I didn't want because the topic was going to be very heavy, and I didn't want to end on a downer. So that's my husband with the fiddle, and my son is playing the drum. And here's my scrapbook page. You can see that you're in it. Down here at number 4 is a selfie that I took at one of our summits. You guys are very important to me, and you're definitely part of my story. So, what tools did we use? What tools were we able to leverage so that the power of story could be told and people could want to actually use these tools? And the first one we started off with was Yammer. Yammer is an enterprise social media network that we have here at work. And a lot of people just thought it was a frivolous distraction. So we wanted to make sure that if people did go to Yammer, if there was something compelling on Yammer that would make them want to come back. And so we did announcements about the Power Stories sessions. And there was photos of the Power Story sessions afterwards. So we had announcements before, photos after. Then we got brave enough to start capturing the Power Story sessions on video. We tried video kind of early in the program, and it seemed to take the energy out of the room. But once the program had a life of its own, we brought video back in and we started to tape them with the idea that a lot of people would want to hear the story, but not everybody could fit in the room, right? You could only put so many people in the lunch, and you could only afford to buy lunch for so many people. But a lot of people wanted to hear the story, so we started to put them on video. And you can post the video right on Yammer. And Yammer does take a hashtag, so it's easy to find other stories, older stories, when you're looking for a power story. And this is what Yammer looks like. You can see it looks very kind of Facebooky. It's got different options here on the left, and then there's a news feed, and it'll take a hashtag. So this is just some photos that I took when our CEO Kerry did a power story session for us. And we also, as I said, we feed people, right? They get a lunch during a lunch and learn. And we started off offering just random lunch orders. I would get up on the Panera Bread website and just order kind of an assortment. And then I would send out an email to everybody in attendance. Do you have any special needs? And it really surprised me that the responses that I got were so detailed, and they were kind of oversharing. Like when you ask people, do you have any special needs? They want to, because they feel like they're asking for something special, they want to justify it for you. And I just felt like, man, I just don't want to. I don't want to put people in the position where they have to disclose something uncomfortable about their health. So we came up with this idea that we would send out a survey, and then people could pick what they want from the menu, and everybody would get what they wanted, and they didn't have to feel like they needed to disclose something personal. So we used the Excel surveys. That was very effective, and it makes a nice spreadsheet for when you're doing your order. And then Microsoft rolled out an application called MS Forms, which are even better. They kind of look good on the computer screen, and they're phone friendly, so people could take their lunch survey on their phone. And this is what it looks like. You can see on the left, this is a screenshot of what the survey looks like on a laptop. And then over here on the right, that's a screenshot of how it looks on the phone. So Microsoft Forms was a really good tool, and we got people to start using it. And people, not just to take the forms that we created for the lunches, but also the next time they wanted to take a survey, they didn't go to SurveyMonkey or Wufoo or some of the other survey choices that they had. They are actually using Microsoft Forms, and that was an improvement for us because we felt like we had an exposure with people using a lot of different survey tools that they weren't necessarily secure, and we felt like that was a risk. We wanted to encourage people to use the secure form, which would be Microsoft Forms. So that's Yammer, and then that's Forms. And the next thing that we wanted to do is to get the video in. Now, Microsoft has, Office 365 has two options for video. There's an old format, Office 365 video, and then they had a redesign and they developed an app called Stream. And Stream is a whole lot more like YouTube. It does have a lot more functionality. It'll take hashtags, and it suggests other videos just like YouTube does. So this is what the Office 365 video looks like. You can see it's just kind of plain. There's a video on my screen and the title of the video is shown, but there's not a whole lot else on the screen. It's very clean, I suppose. You can see that there are buttons for uploading and that kind of thing. But Stream looks a whole lot better. See how you can see the video you're watching in the hero position, and then a lot more videos are suggested for you. You can see, because this is a Power of Story session, that it's also suggesting some other Power of Story sessions. So that was Stream. We wanted to make sure that people knew where Stream was. Office 365 navigation's a little clunky sometimes. We wanted to make sure that they could find Stream, and then the next time that they were uploading something, that they would use Stream. And because we had a lot of people using Vimeo and they had created their own YouTube channels, and we wanted to try to get it all in a secure place, and Stream was the answer for that. And we set the example by uploading the Power of Story series, and that way people had something that they wanted to see that was on that tool, and they began to use it themselves. And we talked about the scrapbook pages. That's basically stories for shy people. Then we were trying to decide where's a good place to put the scrapbook pages. And at first, the decision was made, we will use SharePoint to, that will be the source for the scrapbook pages. You could also put your scrapbook page on that Delve tool, because Delve will do blogging. And so that was the initial idea for the scrapbook pages. And so this is what you guys have seen SharePoint before, but this is what graphics looks like in SharePoint. So you can see the scrapbook pages. You can kind of preview them, and then you can drill into any you want to see up close. And then, so that was the scrapbook pages, and they were on SharePoint. And then the next thing to try to get people to use SharePoint, well, we wanted them to learn to use the SharePoint calendar. Sorry about the noise in the background, guys. It's a busy office here. So we put the events that you could sign up for on the event calendar in SharePoint, and that gave people a reason to go to SharePoint. They had been kind of avoiding SharePoint because they were not familiar with the tool. And so we put a calendar up there where they could sign up to get their lunch. And this is what the calendar looks like. We did buy this little plug-in, so that's why there are two different calendar colors. So anything that's a dark blue is something that has a sign-up sheet. We bought this plug-in from an organization called SharePoint Sapiens, and it's a pretty slick little thing. You can create the event, give a description, the time, the location, and then you tell it how many seats are available in that. So let's say we're doing a lunch for 50 people. I tell it 50. And then you can tell it whether or not you want the waiting list enabled, or if you just want it when it's full, it's full. And if you tell it that you want the waiting list enabled, Then as people cancel, um, this thing integrates really well with your Outlook calendar. So if you delete or decline the meeting on your Outlook calendar, the system will get an email. And then if there's a waiting list, it will take the person who just declined off of the list and put the next person in line for the waiting list. So that plugin really saved us a lot. And you can see we have some really great events. There's a breast cancer awareness event that you can sign up for. There's a Power of Story event. I guess this is the Hispanic Heritage Month celebration that I was talking about earlier. We've got a cybersecurity awareness party. We're going to have that. October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Anyway, so that's how we got people to start using SharePoint, because they had to use the calendar if they wanted to go to lunch. The name of the plugin. Oh, hi. So the question from the chat box was the name of the plugin. It's SharePoint Sapiens, Sapiens, like Homo sapiens, like humans. And the plugin is really slick. Too bad they're not sponsoring me. All right. You're welcome. So now it's your turn. If I can, I'm going to go back to the chat window here. And I don't know if you have any other ideas about including stories in your technical communication. You know, we talked earlier about using scenarios in your e-learning projects will make your training much stickier and people will remember it better if you can kind of humanize it, put it in context. You could add photos and video to your technical documentation. You can seek testimonials in your technical documentation and tell people's stories. You can turn on comments if you've got sort of a wiki-like format. Ed Marsh at the Conduit conference was encouraging us all to do newsletters, to start a newsletter about your technical documentation, especially if you have a large user community. You might want to use a newsletter to tell stories about what's new and maybe highlight a feature that's you feel people don't know, may or may not know about. So I really appreciated he's going to be doing that talk that he did at Conduit. I believe it's January or February. He is on the schedule. You can go ahead and sign up for that one now. It's adding, I guess, demonstrating the value of your technical communication. Anyway, one way we can do that is to start a newsletter, and we can communicate our ROI to our management with stories. Anybody have any other ideas about how to use stories in technical communication? I realize it's without the audio, it's hard. So I'm going to move on. Do you have any questions? If you want to type your questions into the chat window, I'll be glad to answer them. But you don't have to. So I want to leave you with a parting thought. I want you to share your story. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, just the act of pulling together your story is very life affirming. To see where you've come and the struggles that you've overcome, where you started out, it's just very life affirming. You'll find out that you're not as bad as you thought you were, and that you are worthwhile and you have done great things and come a long way. Now, if you do decide to share your story out loud to other humans, being vulnerable and sharing with someone is very healing. So you can get a lot of value, I think, out of sharing your story. Encouraging others on the journey, that's very generous. So if you can tell a story of something that you overcame and it can encourage another person, that's really generous. So I would love to swap stories with you. So I'm going to be sending you my contact information. And if you want to tell me a little bit about your journey, maybe you've done some blogging. I've done a bit of blogging of my journey. I will send you links to that. I did do a power story that is up on YouTube, and I will send you a link to that after the webinar. And I would love to swap stories with you and hear about you. So here's my contact information. I am Viqui Dill. I've got a bio on the Washington, D.C. Baltimore chapter website. I have a blog, vickidill.wordpress.com. You can reach me at the social media address for the WDCB chapter. I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm on Facebook. So connect with me. I like to connect. Well, anyway, so I've come to the end of my presentation. I just want to thank everybody for coming. Thank you for coming and staying and chatting. I do enjoy doing this kind of thing, and I do enjoy sharing my story. And you guys do me a great honor by just listening to my story of the project, my story of my story.